First, going back to Terminator, it all starts with James Cameron. I mean, for me, he is simply the greatest filmmaker alive. The movie was so far ahead of its time, and the thing that I actually really loved about it was that it wasn't just a great science fiction movie, it wasn't just a great man versus machine movie, it was actually a love story at the center of it.
At the heart of this great science fiction film is this real emotional story. I still remember watching the original Terminator and thinking way back then, oh wow, this is a love story. It's this incredible science fiction movie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is this killer robot, and it's all incredibly cool. But for me, the movie always boiled down to the line, I came across time for you, Sarah.
There was no comparable female action, not even like a hero, an archetype. I mean, I think that's the thing that Jim does just so beautifully, is he taps into this warrior goddess archetype. And Sarah was so, for me anyway, I just remember finding it a very revolutionary experience creatively.
For me, one of the things when we actually did get the rights to Terminator was, okay, why now? Because if you're going to do a newer version of a movie like this, you shouldn't just do it just because you bought the rights. It's how do you make it relevant? And for us, the why now has always been the technology.
You know, in the original film, Skynet had to bash through your front door, but today it's completely different. We line up days before the new iPhone comes out to basically go get the Apple Store to actually, you know, invite Skynet in through the front door. We're constantly giving away our privacy. We can't live without our phone.
If you look around a restaurant, how many people are actually talking to one another and how many people are looking down at devices? How much of our lives are absolutely dependent upon devices? And this movie basically poses the ultimate question of, at what point is the tipping point? And that is what Genisys is. Genisys is the moment of that tipping point.
A lot of people have asked us, there was no version of Terminator without Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, Arnold is the Terminator. It's his most iconic role.
But yes, it was incumbent upon us to try to figure out a way that you don't feel like you're just seeing him do a repeat of any of the other movies. And that was really important to all of us. We wanted to be very respectful of Arnold, and we wanted to be very respectful of the character that he created. I mean, it's a legacy character.
30 years ago, we started with that franchise, and I did not think then, when we did the first Terminator, there ever will be a sequel. But now, all of a sudden, here's the fifth. And not only the fifth, but 30 years later, you get asked to come back and to be the Terminator again. So this was really a fantastic kind of news to me, and I was honored that I was offered the role again. I'm still the Terminator 30 years later, so that was really extraordinary.
We had been writing a different project for David and Dana, David Ellison at Skydance. And as we were finishing the first pass on that, they had been putting together the rights with Megan Ellison for doing a new Terminator film. I think they had talked to Laeta a few times, in which she kept saying no. Yeah.
I did not feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable given my relationship with the person who had created the universe. It felt like, you know, mildly sacrilegious.
And then you changed your mind?
Well, I finally ended up talking to Jim about whether or not he thought I should do it. And he was incredibly supportive in a way that only someone with that level of creative generosity can be. You know, it was a world that he had left behind, and he felt that I should, if I wanted to go ahead and do it, that it would not be anything that he felt would hurt the franchise.
The writer's a good friend of mine, Laeta Kalogridis, and she has a writing partner, Patrick, that she works with now. But she and I have written together in the past. So she kind of asked me to, you know, unofficially advise, you know, and I said, look, the thing that's most clear to me is, I think the Terminator, there's a way to explore his character that could actually be fun and open it up more while still giving fans what they want. And it has to do with this idea that he's not really a robot. He's a cyborg. He has a robotic endoskeleton, but he's the org part of cyborg is an organic organism. So he's got living human tissue over the outside. And so that would age And so the idea that Arnold now, as a 60-something, is playing the same character that he played back when he was in his late 30s, or mid-30s, I guess, is perfectly plausible in that world if you buy into the conceits of that world.
You know, the construction of the story, it wasn't about, you know, creating a reboot. It wasn't about creating something that nullified the films that have gone before. It was about creating a story that could work in concert with what happened and how we were going to continue on in different directions.
And we also started from a place of, for us, a Terminator universe is always going to have fundamental aspects to it. In this case, it's always going to have a Sarah Connor, it's always going to have a Kyle Reese, it's always going to have a John, and it's always going to have a Terminator.
Of youthifying, obviously, Guardian to turn our 67-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger into a 50-year-old version of himself. Then we actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett, who basically is the only human being on the planet who is almost as big as Arnold was when he was Mr. Universe.
It was all sort of choreographed with a stunt double. You sort of acted that out. But what happened throughout the process is we basically had to discard the plate almost entirely. We almost had to say, like, okay, you know, the lens isn't quite right to be, you know, correct enough and close enough to the original footage, and the framing isn't quite right. So we decided basically to go almost full CG.
The first process is you build the model, which gets you very, very close to where you want to be. But then at the end of it, you get into this uncanny area when you're looking at it to where you're 5% off, things will look right, but it's that glint behind the eyes, it's the way the light interacts with your skin, all of this incredibly finite detail that separates from something that feels actually alive and living and something that just feels dead. Well, the sculpt of his cheekbones feel a little bit better. His face feels just a little bit wider. And I think if we take that down, and so we really feel like, I think it'll accentuate the cheek line more, make the jawline more defined, which is so Arnold.
The review process with our clients started off, you know, at the beginning mostly with us working together with Yannick, basically. And we sort of had regular review sessions with him 2 or 3 times a week where we went through the processes and the steps. With a character like the young Arnold, it was something that, you know, took pretty much, you know, our entire time from the start of the show when we first started working on this project all the way to the end, where we literally continuously built and refined this young Arnold character. Then further down the line, when it came more to the shot production, we started, you know, being more and more exposed to the filmmakers like Alan Taylor, on David Ellison, and Dana Goldberg. It was a highly creative process, but also a very time-consuming process for us to, you know, study and research like what Arnold, it was like back then, effectively.
Nice night for a walk.
Wash day tomorrow. Nothing clean, right?
Nothing clean. Right.
You know, Terminator movies have a history of phenomenal practical effects and groundbreaking visual effects.
Cameron, when he makes movies, always pushes the envelope on what's possible.
Well, Terminator 2 was made at really the dawn of the CG character age. We made a whole movie in 1990, it was released in the summer of '91, that had a fluid metallic character as the bad guy. So we were betting the farm on this new technique, and it kind of just blew up. 2.5 decades later, it's an extremely mature art form.
Well, the T-1000, we wanted to explore about how we could take it any further with the breaking down and the transformation of the form. We did a whole bunch of different fancy fluid sims and all the rest of it, but they actually, if anything, the more complex we got, the further away we got from the original material. Weirdly enough, we went completely full circle back to almost doing it in a similar fashion to how they did it on T2, to actually obtain that similar sort of look. So, for example, the shot where he comes through the window in the police car is all just a series of sculpts. Equally, when he melts in the acid bath, that is all pure fluid sim.
We had some fantastic performance from Byung-Hun for the T-1000, and we really wanted to get the essence of his acting across, even though parts of him were going to be fully CG. To tackle that, we really developed a pipeline that allowed us to work iteratively in effects very quickly to dial in more of his performance or dial it more towards effects for dramatic effect, specifically in the acid bath sequence of him being eroded away.
It's very hard to surprise people. So, you know, the challenge on this film was, yes, we're going to see Terminator endoskeletons, and we're going to see a lot of other CG effects that you might not think too much about. But in the center of it all is this new bad guy. And he can't just be the same simple liquid metal dude that we saw, you know, couple decades ago. So they've gone to a much higher level.
I think we kept pushing ourselves to try and find a vocabulary for that villain and the imagery that would be almost as challenging. Cameron's T-1000 was a beautiful creature that was absolutely simple, and we have a beautiful creature that is absolutely complex, and so we're sort of embracing complexity in our T-3000.
D-Neg did an unbelievable job on this movie and really delivered in every single way with the design of John Connor, who is a man-machine hybrid whose body has actually been infected on a cellular level.
You know, you have to think about the lineage behind it all. You know, from the T-800, the T-1000, what would be the next design, being as it's Skynet that's designed this thing. So he is, at the start, they're just replicating him. So it's a nanosite humanoid thing.
That hurt.
We start to develop this from last year, basically from how he looks like, from the concept to modeling, the shader. We went through a lot of development until roughly last December. It's kind of confirmed.
The fact that Cyberdyne had come up with a way of replacing and improving on the human body with these intelligent particles, who was never in a stable state. He was constantly being reinvented, and the analogy we came up with was as if he was being 3D printed.
My mission was to literally build this like superhuman, but with all this design in it. We started like some kind of two branch of it, like one be like fully nanotech kind of organic fields, and one would be like more close to T-800's Skynet fields. Ultimately, this would be like the containers and the guides for all the nanomachine effects, which would be on top of this.
Our job kind of started once the design was sort of settled. So our job was to actually make him look like he's made out of a million little nanobots or something, some sort of nanotech that's kind of making up the whole idea of John Connor. Traditional animation, you would just animate each point, but it gets really tricky for like a million nanopoints. So we came up with algorithms and we invented all those really advanced techniques, but once it was all set up, it was the machine doing the work for us. Because you're never gonna get away with like animating millions of points for like 1,000 shots.
Crank it!
They can't kill John Connor, you know, so then they need to control John Connor. So the T-2000 in that sense is not a, you know, it's not a straight robot. It is partly John. It's very important in our eye scene is to actually see that he is susceptible to something. So yes, he's slowly being pulled apart in layers on that particular shot, and you can see the various different organs in there. So that's obviously after that he's designed a little bit more all the way through the film, to the point where you see him in the fight at the end. He's a much more streamlined and ripped version of that.
There's that technique, it's called phasing. It's when the T-3000 goes through the Terminator and shreds his cloth and all his skin. Obviously, that's something we've never seen before, and it's really hard to imagine because it's such an advance and it's really complicated and complex to describe. Obviously, we need to show like different versions and different ideas and go through like a lot of iterations.
The phasing was one kind of trademark moment within that sequence where he's supposed to kind of separate and then reform around Guardian, go through him, create a lot of damage. And basically, Jason Clarke turns into his T-3000 form.
Obviously, you need to get the animation right. It needs to look like two guys are actually fighting. So we had like this really advanced motion capture technology, which kind of fed into the animation, which then fed into the nanofication process. And that bring all that pretty much from CG onto the screen to like a photoreal composite. That was a tough challenge.
That is one of the last shots that they finished on the movie, and in that shot, John Connor, T-1000 is entirely CG. Arnold Schwarzenegger in Guardian is entirely CG, and the environment that they take place in is 90% CG. And literally it looks photorealistic and perfect, and the work they have done on this movie is truly, truly groundbreaking.
What are you?
I'm Skynet.
The T-5000 was, it went through a few looks before we finally settled on what you will see in the finished film. This laser would ionize the air and actually create particles from elements that were already there, but they were just almost solidifying them. So as he grew, he became more and more of a physical creature.
So it starts as a child, it grows all the way through to be Matt Smith and the T-5000. So we wanted that as some kind of design ethic to show evolution, complexity, and rapid growth. There was a lot of ideas about what the T-5000 should be. I mean, what is pure Skynet?
Phosphorescence is really the element that we looked at because we wanted kind of the air particles to ionize on, and not the hologram you've seen 1,000 times, but for it to be something different with technology you hadn't seen before. You know, if you go night diving, you shut off all your lights and you wave your hand underwater, you'll get these kind of green phosphorescence that will glow and kind of ionize on, ionize off.
We needed him to be immediately recognizable. When Jai looks at him and says, "That's the thing that attacked John."
That's the thing that attacked John. I didn't attack John. I saved him.
We needed to really understand that he had the ability to do that.
The feedback that I've been given or that I've received so far from the filmmakers or from Yannick or Sherry, it's been positive. And I think everyone on the production side was very happy, and I hope that they're all very pleased with the results.
Hopefully the guys in the audience look at the T1000, the T3000 and still see that it harks back to the original material, you know, albeit with a slightly different twist. You know, it's a lot of work. A huge amount of people have worked a lot of time on this, and hopefully it shows.
Yay! All right, that's all, folks. Thank you very much for your time.